Well, the Knights broke the losing streak and finally won a game against Arizona, but can they go on the road and beat one of the best teams in the Big 12 against Arizona State? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With a large selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, NHL to entertainment and political props. Head to BetOnline today to get on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Got a lot to get to today. A lot to get to. First, shout out men's basketball. The UCF men's basketball team. First game of the season. I was in attendance. We're going to be doing some stuff on the channel. Obviously, it's a Charge On, a UCF football podcast. I'm not going to change the name, but it's a UCF sports podcast. But UCF men's basketball, and that came out, beat number 13 Texas A&M. An ugly game. Very ugly game. Had a lot of guys out with injury, so hopefully they can get some guys back. Sellers, Mikey Williams. But Johnny Dawkins, man, under promise, over deliver. In the first game, beats the number 13 in the country. 13 team.
Yeah, I watched that entire game on ESPN Plus, and I had FOMO. I had absolute FOMO watching that game.
You had an opportunity. You had an opportunity.
You know what? I have work. I had work to do. Full-time work. I had full-time work to deal with. And the Bucks were playing on Monday night, so I'm sorry. It didn't take precedent over that. But I mean, UCF is a basketball school, Sean. I mean, haven't we established that at this moment in time? They are a basketball school, so maybe we should up our coverage a little bit here on the show of the UCF basketball team. And like you said, very ugly game. As I understand it, I am not the biggest expert when it comes to college basketball. I am what you call the definition of a casual fan. But from what I understand, Texas A&M, led by Buzz Williams, sort of lost some of their best scorers in the offseason. And preseason polls can be a little wacky sometimes in all sports, as we know, especially in football. But regardless, they were ranked 13. And yeah, both teams just struggling to shoot the basketball. But for UCF to get that win at home without Jalen Sellers, Mikey Williams did not play either. The boot on his leg. That's a big time victory. And the court storm. Texas A&M got South Carolina stormed the field on Saturday after beating Texas A&M, and then UCF storms the court after beating them in basketball 2 days later. What a rough weekend for Aggieland. A very rough weekend for Aggieland, but it looked like a fun atmosphere. I'm going to try to get. I am approved for a few games this year that I can make it to. So. Specifically the Kansas one in January, which I'm excited to get up to. So I'm going to get more into it this year.
Yeah, I'll be attending a good chunk of them. They stopped Wade Taylor. Wade Taylor on Texas A&M, he had like a bunch of 30-point games, a 40-point game last season, and UCF pretty much held him in check. The atmosphere, I will say, Nick, I went to many basketball games last season. Luckily, I live 5 minutes away, so it's easier. And now with us kind of covering the team this season, the atmosphere is crazy. UCF, like you said, UCF's a basketball school. I will say, like, I kind of started feeling it last season with the environment and the in-game experience with UCF basketball. I think it's going to be a special season. That place was packed. Obviously, for the gimme games, and for gimme games, you know what I'm talking about, the Purdue F&W that's coming up on Friday. Like, some of these games, I'm not expecting that. I'm not expecting fans to like pack the arena for that, but
there probably won't be 8,000 plus in the arena.
Exactly. But for the Big 12 schedule, I will say the environment is everything you'd want it to be for college basketball. So I'm excited for you to come up and get that experience.
I just love how after one night of Big 12 basketball, this was Big 12 SEC, but you get my point. It seems like the Big 12 is the chaos conference in basketball, the same way it is the chaos conference in football, as we'll continue to dive in here as we switch over to football. So I like that, though. The Big 12 is just chaos in every sport right now.
Yeah, but Big 12, it's they're clear-cut number one. It's a tough conference in basketball, but I get your point. It is chaos.
Isn't it like what?
Night.
They had 5 teams in the top 10? Was that the Big 12? Or?
Yep, 5 teams in the top 10. It's going to drop because Baylor got like bow raced by Gonzaga, so they'll drop a little bit, but going to be a lot of teams in the top 25. But that's our little basketball talk on the pod, but you'll be getting a lot more basketball coverage this year from us. Let's talk about it, Nick. Arizona State, one of the best teams in the Big 12 this year. I was dead wrong. We each had a prediction. I think we were probably the worst at predicting the worst team in the Big 12. You said BYU. I said Arizona State. And look at us. We look like idiots. So that's why we are a UCF football podcast, because we, I think, tend to know UCF very well. Arizona State head coach Kenny Dillingham. Gus knows him very well. Was the OC under Gus. Didn't call plays. Or I think he might have called plays at one point for Gus. Not exactly sure, because Gus's carousel with who he let call plays in his career is very minimal. But I think the big story, because we could talk about the big turnaround, winning 3 games last year to now being 6-2, already good for a bowl game, and trying to make a run for a Big 12 title. Don't know if it's going to happen with their 2 losses, but the big question, I think we just don't bury the lead. If Skattebo is out, how big of a difference does that make for UCF traveling there this weekend?
I think it makes a big difference. Like, when I was looking at Arizona State's production on offense this year, you mentioned it. Cam Skattebo's got 1,001 yards on the ground this year. So he's accounting, and they have 1,600. They have just over 1,600 yards total on the ground. So he's accounting for most of that production. And then in the receiving game, he's got 404 yards, 20 receptions, 2 touchdowns through there. And the next closest to him, because he's the second leading receiver, as you mentioned, behind Jordan Tyson, the next closest guy to him is the tight end, Shimon Meta. I'm going to butcher this name. Sean, and I apologize to any Arizona State fans that are listening. Shimon Metire? I feel like I butchered that. I hate it. I hate it already. But regardless, he's at 199 yards receiving. So yeah, he makes up a lot of the production on this Arizona State offense. And we already saw when Levitt didn't play in the Cincy game, right? The game that they lost 24-14.
Yeah. We
saw what taking him out of the equation did to their offense. And now if Skattebo doesn't play, that forces a lot of guys to have to step up in his absence, because we obviously get a chance to watch RJ Harvey weekly in person. And we can tell that he's one of the best running backs in college football. But Skattebo's right there with him. And he's meant the world to this Arizona State team, which is 6-2 right now, which I think got jobbed a little bit. They were not ranked in the top 25 poll that came out, not the poll, but the college football playoff ranking, the inaugural one, which really doesn't mean all that much, but we're still going to bitch and moan about it, of course. They were not ranked in there. They probably had a case maybe, but it's semantics at this point. But yeah, I think that's the whole thing we're keeping our eyes on at this moment is, does Skattebo play or does not play? I think it changes a lot. Like, I'm not sure what the betting line is, Sean. Do you have the betting line for this game yet? Where it's at?
I don't. I think at the beginning of the week it was 6.5 in Arizona State's favored, but I'm sure by now it's probably dipped a little. I can look that up pretty quickly though, because I would assume they're still favored.
It's down to 3 right now. It's down to 3.
I mean, listen,
because that's exactly what I was going to say. I feel like that was probably going to be a 50% split on the betting line, probably depending on Skattebo's availability.
Yeah, I mean, it does matter. I mean, it is like Sam Levitt being out is definitely something for sure too. Jeff Sims is your quarterback. That makes a difference. But when you look at it, that's like taking RJ Harvey off of this offense. Yes, you have Miles Montgomery. Yes, you have, comparable guys that can, be successful. And we'll get into Arizona State's backups and what they can do. But when you talk about a guy that, I mean, if you just look at, has over 1,000 yards on only 173 carries, has 11 rushing touchdowns, and then receiving, has 404 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. That's where you look at it and You talked about offensive production. You talked about, how would UCF be able to stop him in both the run and the pass game, because you have to keep an eye on him at all times. Not many teams have proven that they can. So coming into this game with coaching staffs that know a lot about each other, right? Kenny Dillingham said him and Addison Williams were like best friends at Auburn. They worked really closely together on the offensive staff. But then Gus also knows Kenny, and there's a lot. And then Coach Gibbs is over at Arizona State. So there's a lot of mixing and matching of knowing both all of these coaches. And when you have a player like that not playing, it only helps UCF. Like, it can only help UCF not having to play it. But then for Arizona State, there's an extra chip on their shoulder. Like, we don't have our best player. This is time for us to step up and show that we are just that good against a team that demolished our in-state rival a week prior. We want to show that we can beat them down and prove that, number one, we're the best team in the state. Number two, we're one of the best teams in the Big 12, and we can do it even without our best player.
Yeah, I believe the guy accounted for like 200, and I think if my math is correct here, he accounted for 274 yards total in the win over Oklahoma State last week. A big win, 42-21. Now, Oklahoma State is in dire straits right now at 3-6 and 0-6 in the conference, by the way. So they're not a good football team. But to still go on the road in Stillwater and put out a state performance like that, I think that's still big time in conference play. And obviously Skattebo was responsible for most of that, 3 total touchdowns in that game. Like, again, we can't emphasize that enough. He is sort of like what RJ Harvey is to the UCF offense. And like you said, does anybody want to dare to watch the UCF offense try to operate without RJ Harvey? I mean, we've seen what the offense has looked like with RJ Harvey for the majority of this season. Does anybody want to care to look what it looks like without him? My mind can't even get there, to be honest with you, Sean. So, yeah, that's going in the favor. Now, Dillingham, the way he worded it was interesting. You don't see this often, I feel like, where he said doubtful to questionable, because doubtful is basically code for he's not playing. Questionable, typically, I almost feel like that's like 75% going to play. Sometimes the situations are different.
So he kind of, in the presser, Skattebo, I think it's Skattebo. I think we said Skattebo. I think
I'm just butchering
Skattebo.
Names all over the place.
I think
today.
It might. Well, I said it too, and I know Arizona State fans are going to kill us. I apologize. I think it might be Skattebo. But he was talking about. He said doubtful to questionable. You can look it up to make sure I'm saying it right, because now
I am, because it's going to bother me. It's really going to bother me.
That's why I changed it. Dude's a beast. I'm not, with no disrespect to Skattebo. But he said...
Yeah, it is. You're right. Skattebo.
See, so we've been saying this wrong for at least 10 minutes. So
all right, let's restart. Let's restart at this moment.
We're restarting. It's Skattebo. Listen, we work on the fly. We figured it out. Arizona State fans, no disrespect. He's a Heisman contender, or top 10 Heisman candidate. So we'll keep it at that. He said doubtful to questionable, and then later on in the press conference, Dillingham said doubtful. So I think it's closer to the doubtful side. I don't get the vibe that he's going to play. He kind of got ringed on that last play. If you go back and watch the last play where he was in the game, he got hit pretty hard. I couldn't tell if it was head. I couldn't tell if it was a shoulder. It's undisclosed injury. He didn't say what the injury was. So it's basically up for speculation. If it was a head injury, you can almost usually 100% guess that they don't play the week after. Not everybody's Drake May, I guess. But
had to get that in there, didn't you?
Had to get it in there. But if it's a shoulder or something like that, it has to be pretty serious for him to say doubtful.
Yeah, and even if he does play, what sort of load is he going to get? Is he going to get a full load, or are they going to try to split him up a little bit more in the running game with Kyson Brown, who had 2 touchdowns last week in that game against Oklahoma State? So he looks like he could be a very capable runner too, but obviously he's not Skattebo. But yeah, those are all the questions. That's what makes it very hard to handicap this game, because I think let's not dance around it. When we've been looking at the schedule, regardless of what UCF did last week against Arizona, going on the road against Arizona State, given the way that they're playing ball right now under Kenny Dillingham, given the fact that they have a top 10 Heisman guy in Skattebo, and Sam Leavitt coming off his best game of the season, probably, I'd argue, against Oklahoma State as well. And defensively, pretty ranking near the top of the Big 12 in all categories, especially against stopping the run, which we'll get to. So when you look at all that stuff, it was like, okay, path to UCF victory, probably going to be a tough one. But he just makes such a difference that it opens up the possibilities here. So that's what makes it very hard to handicap, I would say, this game. And the fact, too, that this was interesting to me. Arizona State has not, it is, as the time of recording, as we're recording right now, it's November 5th. Arizona State has not played a home game, Sean, since October 11th on a Friday. They had the very rare bye week after, came back and played, then got another bye week, and then came back and played. You don't really see that. I don't really see that much in college football where you have them that close together like that, because I know every team gets 2 bye weeks. But they're going to be going a straight month without playing at home. So that crowd's going to be energized. The crowd's going to be energized, and those guys are going to be happy to finally play in front of a home crowd. So all this stuff sort of factors in, I think, to how we're going to feel about this game.
Yeah, and you also have to, that is a good point, first home game in a while. You also have to take into account their back half, and by back half, I mean the next 4 games. They have some tough opponents. You have to go to Kansas State, never an easy place to play. You get BYU at home, but as we've seen from BYU, I think, honestly, that might be one of the most fun games on the slate for the next couple weeks in the Big 12, because BYU versus Arizona State, you're matching 2 physical football teams. I don't think that game will be high scoring at all, because it's just 2 pound for pound, want to punch you in the mouth. And that's where, we talk about, we kind of discussed and we saw the way that UCF handled BYU, right? We saw how it was, BYU punched UCF in the mouth consistently. UCF really didn't have an answer for it. They got some points late in the game, whatever. Arizona State, specifically on both sides of the ball, but we're on offense right now. Their offensive line loves to hit, they are physical. They are a physical front line. And for UCF, you had a lot of success last week. Do you think they can carry it over? Again, with Skattebo out, that helps. But they've proven that they can be a well-balanced football team. They don't really beat themselves. They love to run the football, but they can really throw the football too with Sam Leavitt. Do you think after last week's performance, the defensive line can do even comparable damage to the Sun Devils?
It's going to be tough, because this is a really good offensive line. It's a really good offensive line, especially from a pass blocking standpoint. They've graded out generally well across the board this season. Leavitt's been sacked 10 times this year through the 8 games that they've played, so not too much that he's been hit, or at least knocked down, rather. And I think, in terms of, you asked me, can UCF replicate what they did last week? Man, I don't know how you feel about what happened on Saturday. If that's some sort of all of a sudden that's a turning point for the program or what. I mean, I don't think it is. It was one of those, just, again, we said it on Saturday's show. It was a perfect storm, really. It was a perfect day. And everything came together for one day. And also, I feel like the opponent sort of played a role in that too. And the fact that the space thing is just starting to be a real thing at this point, and I cannot explain it. So, like I said then, it's all about the follow-up. It's all about the follow-up. And the opponent here is much tougher than what you faced on Saturday. And all the other components, too, of what UCF is going to, with Dylan Brisk getting a second start, and now there being film on him. All those things are going to sort of factor into this. So, but to go back to what you said, can the defensive line continue to get pressure and try to impact the game as well as they did against Arizona? It's the big, I don't really have a great answer for it, because we haven't really seen them be able to stack multiple games together of showing that they're capable of doing it yet. And like I just mentioned, I think this is a much better offensive line than the one you went up against last week.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd give the same answer. To be honest, until they prove it consistently, it's really hard to think that will be the norm. especially like you're looking at Arizona, and I think you can make the argument, I don't know if it's that much of an argument, that Arizona is the worst Big 12 team this year. I don't think that's really that big of an argument. Just by watching how they play football, it's not great. So can the defensive line get pressure? Sure. Will they? That's a whole other question. Let's see what Aston Williams can draw up. That's the next thing. Like, I think the change of coordinators, Kenny Dillingham made a good point where it's like, and with Addison, you kind of can tell because he was the DC last year, and you can really tell tells. And that kind of gets us into the offensive side for UCF and the defensive side for Arizona State, which is with two new coordinators, you don't really get tells. Dillingham said, like, usually you can watch a bunch of tape, see what tells on certain downs and et cetera, stuff like that. But when you make a coordinator change and there's only been one game of tape, what if they change it up the next week? Like, those tells might not be the same as if you had a full season of just straight film on them. So that could play into UCF's favor. The negative of that is, at the end of the day, you know they're going to want to run into RJ Harvey. They do have a throwing quarterback, so you kind of have to take that into account. But if you get pressure on him, it's not like a Jakari Brown that's going to go run for 150 yards. So what do you need to see? I guess the real question is, what do you need to see out of Dylan Riss this week? And kind of vice versa with that, what do you need to see out of Tim Harris Jr. To make sure that they're switching it up enough to where it's not the exact same game as last week?
Yeah, I mean, I want to see if they can continue the balance that you saw them be able to go into in that game against Arizona. Like, that was the most balanced I think we've seen them all season, to be honest with you. And, you know, Dylan made some really big-time throws, and we mentioned them, obviously. When I went back and watched, I mean, you could, once you get a chance to watch back the replay of the game, you start to see, like, you know, like how they say, it's never as good as you think it is. It's never as bad as you think it is. Dylan Riss still played a hell of a game. Were there some things that were made easy for him? Of course. And that's a good thing, by the way. That is a good thing. Like, some of the passes he completed that made up a lot of the yardage were like screens, for example, where some of your skill players were able to run after the catch a little bit. We saw Jacoby, for example, be able to do that. But again, those are good things. Those are good play calls by Tim Harris Jr. to make your quarterback feel comfortable. And when they had to push it, you know, into those intermediate areas, Dylan did pretty well across the board there. I mean, from what I saw, he only put like a pass or two in harm's way throughout the entire game. So you just hope that he can build off of that. And the fact that Arizona State has a full game of tape on him, I'm sure there's going to be probably an adjustment period that's going to we're going to see in real time here. I don't expect the Dylan Riss to just come out and all of a sudden just keep lighting it up like he did last week. It's still his second start at this level of college football. But if they can maintain some of that balance and keep the defense honest enough that they can get some of those guys in the front seven a little bit out of the box or back them up a little bit more, and that's going to free up RJ, as you saw last week, because that was the big thing with RJ. A lot of his yards earlier in the season, like, he was having to make those all happen at the line on his own, and you saw he was able to get some more room through the middle of the field against Arizona because of the threat that they had in the past. So there were some good things and some good concepts that you can build off of, and we have to see if they can execute that.
Yeah, no, execution, I get some people, it's hard, right? Execution is hard, but they did everything perfect last week. They executed the plan perfect. Now you have to do it again, and you have to do it in a tough environment. We talked about it. The fans are going to be rowdy. If you look at their home slate on the games they have had at home, they had Wyoming, where that was a blowout, which I think that was when we kind of got caught wind of, okay, Arizona State might be legit, because Wyoming's never just a team that you blow out. Like, they're a really good football team. By really good, I mean good at that level. So to blow them out at home, nope, not this year. Then they had Mississippi State, which, again, Mississippi State's probably the worst SEC team this year. They beat them by 7 at home. They beat Kansas by 4 at home. You beat Utah by 8 at home, which that was kind of that was a really close game as well, against a Utah team that's kind of fluttered recently. So
yeah, they've played a lot of close games.
Yeah,
they played a lot of
close games. And if you can make the argument, I think they should be ranked. Like, this is personally, if you look at their schedule, yeah, they lost to Cincinnati. They didn't have their starting quarterback.
Yeah,
I think
and the loss,
if you look
an
at
an 8-point loss to Tech too at Tech is not anything to scoff about. I mean, Tech just beat Iowa State.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is not going to be an easy feat. If you look again, I talked about the offensive line being really dominant and really getting some push. There's a reason Skattebo has had the season he has had because we talk about balanced offenses, right? They're so worried about Skattebo running. It kind of gets him off into the passing game. Same thing with UCF. That's what UCF wants to do. But if you look at this defense, bunch of guys with a bunch of tackles. They fly to the ball. They got sacks. They have 15 sacks on the year. This is going to be another test. And what makes me nervous for UCF facing this type of defense, Nick, is, and I mentioned it earlier, we've seen how they played against these tough teams. They handled it well against Iowa State, which gives me that hope that they can go and do this against a similar type of defense that is really physical and really punches you in the mouth up front. But then we watched BYU, and I think the reason that I'm now holding out some form of hope is that they have that confidence. They got the confidence in the win. They feel like they've got a quarterback. The defense is playing for Addy, and they can go in and punch them in the mouth on offense. But my fear is that it's going to be kind of that replay at BYU where the offense is sputtering, you can't run the football as well, and then it kind of, the dam breaks and you kind of get blown out. Do I think that happens? No.
I don't think they're going to get blown out in the game. To me, BYU, I mean, I think this has sort of played itself out right now that BYU is the best team in the conference. They're as we stand, they're the official number 9 team in the nation from the playoff. And, Sean probably could have made an argument. They could have been a few spots higher, to be honest with you. But
in the Big 12, that's how it's going to be.
Miami's 5, and I think BYU's played better than Miami personally.
I think if BYU and Miami played today, BYU would win. That's my personal opinion.
I would agree because Miami has no defense. Their defense is struggling right now. I shouldn't say they have no defense. There's a lot of talent on that defense, but they're struggling right now. But I just sidetracked myself just so I could pump out some of the conference favorites. But my point with saying that, though, is I just think BYU is legitimately one of the best teams in the country. Okay? Getting blown out by them is, not ideal, but I sort of understand it a little bit because, again, BYU is a top 10 team in the country. Arizona State, while I can make the argument they have a shot at being a ranked team, and you can make that argument if you want, I don't think, and I don't mean this to sound like it's like I'm taking a shot at Arizona State. I'm not. I don't think Arizona State personally is in the same league as BYU. I think they're in that tier.
You can make that argument, yeah.
Yeah, I just think they're in that tier below them. I think they're in that tier below them. I think it's a fair comment to make. I don't think they're as deep as what BYU and all the ways what they bring to the table necessarily. So
you could make the argument that they could be better than Iowa State.
Perhaps. So I don't think it's a game where Arizona State's going to blow them out. And Arizona State, again, outside of Wyoming, and Wyoming's 2-7 this year, by the way. They're 2-7.
They're bad.
They have not blown out any team they've played this year.
No.
30-23 against Mississippi State. Mississippi State's the worst team in the SEC. Texas State, 31-28. So that's a very close one there. 35-31 against Kansas. They beat Utah 27-19. Now, Utah was ranked 16 at the time that they played them. As we have seen, Utah is not the same team that they have been in recent years. They're just not. So, yeah, my general point in saying that is I think UCF can keep this game relatively close, even going on the road. And as we mentioned, it's a lot of this is going to depend on Skattebo and his availability, as we already talked about earlier in the show. But I don't think we're heading for blowout territory in this one necessarily.
No, and we haven't gotten to predictions yet, but I would probably tend to agree. I do think UCF has that little bit more bit of confidence. I think Dylan Risks does play with that moxie that he can go in there and try and get a win. But at the same time, understanding that Arizona State, Kenny Dillingham wants this win. Again, with any of these coaches, you want to beat your old coach that you worked for. Same thing at SMU when they played UCF with Rhett Lashley trying to beat Gus. So I think there's other underlying things. There's all respect both ways. But I do think for UCF to have a shot to win, they need to play it like Texas State. They need to play it like, Utah late. You have to be able to run the football effectively against this team, and you need to play elite level defense. And yes, that helps if Skattebo's out, but they've proven they can stop the run. If you can't run the ball on them, luckily you feel like you have a quarterback that can throw the football.
Yeah, I was going to say they're number 4 in the conference at stopping the run, but at the same time they're number 5 at stopping the pass as well. So, like I said, they're a pretty balanced defense, to be honest with you. Kind of have some bend not break elements a part of it when you break them down a little bit, and they got a lot of quality players. Clayton Smith is their top pass rusher in this one, and then LT Welch was sort of my spotlight player of this week. He was a transfer from LSU, the cornerback, and he had 4 pass breakups in the second half alone against Oklahoma State. So he was big time for them, and he's starting to play better as the season goes on. So they're going to give you some. They got some really good players on that other side of the ball. So can UCF sort of keep up a little bit? And on the flip side of that, UCF's defense, the way they played last week, does that carry over, as we already discussed? So it's a lot of unanswered questions, Sean, that we're not going to find out till Saturday. But that's the fun of it.
Most of these questions would have been answered if they lost to Arizona. This would be a quick pod to be like, well,
I know.
We know what's happening.
I'm already struggling with this part. Again, I'm trying not to.
Let's do predictions.
I am trying my damnedest, Sean, not to let last Saturday impact too much about this team.
Do you want to go first?
Because, Sean, leopards don't change their spots. They don't change their spots, Sean. I'll go first.
Valid.
I'm going to pick Arizona State to win. I don't think we're at the point where UCF is, going on the road, cross country, 6-2 ball club. I'm going to go Arizona State 28, and I'm going to go UCF 23. I think they keep it close. I don't know what your
ugly score. That's
I don't know what
ugly score.
I'm not sure what you're scoffing at over there. I think they're going to keep it somewhat relatively close. They'll play them tough, but I think the better team ultimately is going to win out at home.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. No, I got Arizona State winning the game. I am going between 2 scores. And I understand why Vegas kind of moved their line 3.5 points, because Skattebo being out, it does intrigue me to see
if he's out.
Doubtful. But if he's out, it does intrigue me to see how efficient the offense will be without him, because he is, call it like it is. He is their offense. And I just know what would happen if RJ Harvey was out for UCF. So I am debating between 2 scores. I think I'll go with the one that maybe looks better. I'll go 28-27 Arizona State. My second option would have been 31-27 Arizona State. But yeah, I'll say 1-point game. Toss up right now. If Skattebo plays, 34-27. I think ultimately, I think Addison Williams proved a lot last week. Not saying it can't continue, but, we'll see if they could stop the run. That's always the big question with this defense. They've proven they can do it, especially last week. So I have full confidence that they can do it again. But right now I'm going to say 28-27, barring Skattebo being out. All right. Nick, any final thoughts? Listen, if UCF can go back-to-back and win against both Arizona schools, go to what, 4 and 5? Go to 5-5. I mean, that'd be pretty crazy.
Be a hell of a little turnaround, and it would make the last 2 games pretty darn interesting, wouldn't it? So Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. We'll be on for the watch along, of course. And
you're gonna be on for the watch along. See, I haven't asked you that yet.
Oh, I guess I'm breaking news to you too.
Oh wow.
I think I'm gonna be on. I found out. I mean, listen, full disclosure. I don't commit to these things unless I know what my wife is doing on Saturdays, and she's doing a wedding on Saturday. So I'll be a free man on Saturday. So at that point, I will enjoy the watch along. I had a lot of fun when we did it the last time. I was hoping this game would happen really late so we can have a nice late night charge on edition.
You keep saying that.
I was ready for it. I was going to load myself up with coffee. I was going to be ready to roll. I was going to be energized, but whatever. We'll do it earlier in the day. It's still going to be
late night. We're going to be recording the pod at midnight.
Yeah,
it's still going to be late.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, we'll see what happens. In risk we trust. No risk it, no biscuit. I'm trying to think if there's any other sayings that I can make out of Dylan Risk's name off the top of my head.
We're going to have a lot of weeks to think of all the best ones.
I know. If Dylan,
it's going to go downhill if he stinks for the next 3 weeks. It's all going to go downhill.
If UCF wins this game and Dylan Risk has a similar performance to what he did against Arizona, man,
what could have been?
Is I can't wait for the reaction right after. I can't wait.
The sarcasm is blasting through your microphone.
There's no sarcasm coming out of here.
Oh, it is sarcasm. I will not want to go on Twitter.
I'm just saying, like as I said on Saturday, like I am not in good faith going to do the whole thing where I am not in good faith and after I was pretty critical of Gus Malzahn on last Thursday's show rather, I am not going to be that guy that try to make a good faith argument for why, Dylan Risk should have been starting from day one. I can't make that argument. I saw a lot of people, a lot of UCF fans were doing that this whole week. And I just know that if he takes this team into Arizona State on the road and gets a dub, man, it's going to be crazy. The reaction is all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. There's no sarcasm there.
We'll see. Can Risk go in and do it? That's the big question. Can UCF go 5-5 to give yourself 2 chances, 2 opportunities to go to a bowl game? That'll be the big question. Well, me and Nick don't think so. We both said no. So drop your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think UCF will go and beat Arizona State? Let us know. Put your score predictions. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. Like Nick said, come join us for our live watch along, 4.5 hours of just watching the game with us. Hear all the ridiculous things we have to say, all the complaining, mostly. It's a fun time. From me. I think I'm fun to watch, but, that's probably just in my head. But come test it out, and we'll be live for 4.5 hours Saturday. So, like I said, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Charge On, presented by Bet Online. We will see you after the game.